Hello creeps! Andy here, and it is currently 11:13 p.m. but I wanted to film this video for you guys. I was trying to figure out video ideas and I was on Stephen King's Twitter and I actually saw a tweet from him that said, "What is the worst horror movie you've ever seen? For me, it's Blood Feast," or something along those lines. And then I was like, well shoot, now I have to watch Stephen King's least favorite horror film and talk about it on my channel. So alas, here we are. So I watched the film and I just kind of want to talk about it. But first, I need to know, what is your least favorite horror film? I'm very curious. I have been thinking about this a lot and I have a few films that I definitely am not a fan of, but I really don't know if I have one like least favorite horror film, the horror film that I just hate, I'll never watch again. I don't know. So leave yours down below if you have one. Maybe I'll do another video watching those. Okay, so here we go. Stephen King's least favorite horror film. So Blood Feast is actually an original film, but then there's also a remake too. So the original was made in '63 and the remake was made in 2016 if I'm not mistaken. And at first I was going to watch both of them because he did not specify which one he was talking about. And my husband said, and I quote,
"It's obviously the older one."
And I said, why? And he said,
"Because Stephen King's old as
And I said, okay, then I guess I'm watching the older one. But then I went on Rotten Tomatoes and it turns out the older one does have a lower rating. So I was like, okay, it has to be this one. So I watched the '63 version of Stephen King's least favorite film, Blood Feast. Here is my review. First of all, the film is about this man named Fuad Ramses. And he's the owner of this exotic catering company. But he's also a writer, as it turns out as well. I hope you guys aren't planning on watching this film because I'm ruining everything for you right now. So it turns out that he wrote this book called Ancient Weird Religious Rites. We'll come back to that in a second, but he sells that too. Is this the worst horror film I've ever seen? First of all, let's just get this out of the way. No, it's not. It really wasn't. There's a lot of cool scenes in here. Not that they all particularly make the most sense, but there's a scene where Fuad in the very beginning is chopping this woman in a bathtub, and there's this really cool scene where you see her hand like sliding down as he's chopping, and I just thought that was really cool. I always say that there's always something that you can find in a horror film that is something unique or that you haven't seen before, and it's just cool little things like that that I can take with me. Because of little things like that, I don't think it was the worst film that I've ever seen, but we'll get into some things that weren't the best either. The whole point of this movie is that Fuad is a serial killer, and his plan is to kill all of these young girls and take different organs or limbs that he needs to make a concoction to summon an ancient goddess. I think I spelled her name somewhere. It's called the Feast of Ishtar. So he's trying to summon this Ishtar goddess. Then we have this mom who hires Fuad as an exotic caterer, and he says, oh, I can do this feast that hasn't been done in 5,000 years. And he says that a lot during the film. And she's like, oh, that sounds so fun. So he decides to have that be the like Feast of Ishtar, where he can use a girl. I think his plan is to use a girl's body to have like Ishtar overtake it, possess her, is what it seems like, although that doesn't end up ever coming to fruition. So the acting is kind of what you would expect from a '63 horror film to be. Maybe it's worse than that. There's some really bad acting in this film, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty bad. But it's also pretty bloody. There are scenes where Fuad rips a tongue out with his bare hands. There's a scene with a heart being removed from a chest. There's an entire scene where he's like building this concoction for Ishtar. So it is pretty bloody, and I really enjoyed that. There's also a random scene where he cooks a leg in an oven, but doesn't really explain why he's cooking it or anything. But I enjoyed those scenes. I thought that they were really fun, and the special effects weren't terrible. The acting is pretty bad, but the special effects were fun. So then at the end, we find that the women who are murdered have actually bought this Ancient Weird Religious Rites books. So Fuad writes this books, and the women who order it, he's like, ah, that one I'm gonna go and kill. I don't know why that's how he selects his victims, and it's not really explained why that's the reason either, unless I completely missed something, which is definitely possible, but I don't know. That was just like a weird twist in there that I didn't really matter much, but I guess it was the way that the cop figured out who Fuad was, because each girl that got murdered, they're like, does she belong to any organizations? And the parents were always like, oh, she was in a book club. And so that's how they figured out who it was. There are definitely some weird scenes that like don't make sense. For instance, that beginning scene that I was telling you, the woman's sliding down, the scene right before that, she was like passed out in the tub, and then you see her hand sliding down, and then you see her passed out again. So, you know, there are little things that make no sense. Oh, my favorite scene that made absolutely no sense. They're at this pool party, and it's determined that Fuad is trying to kill this main girl, the one that her mom's throwing a feast specifically for her friend. And so they're like all at a pool party hanging out. She's reading a book, the main girl. She's reading a book, and you just see this like shadow come across her, and she's like, and then you see Fuad like jumping over a wall and running away, and it doesn't make any sense. There's absolutely no reason why that happened. Still funny. So all in all, do I think this is the worst film that was ever made? No. Was it enjoyable? Yeah, it was fun. Would I watch it again? Probably not. I did think that it was a fun concept. I mean, not that this is like the most unique concept in the world in this day and age, but I do obviously enjoy hearing about ancient cultures, so it was kind of cool that you did get to delve a little bit more into Egyptian culture. And I don't even know if this Feast of Ishtar is real. I probably should have looked and seen, but if it is, it was pretty brutal. What happened was 5,000 years ago, they used to have these young women go and like mingle with men and drink and like party for a few days, and then afterwards they would steal their organs to give to this ancient goddess. And she was supposed to be a goddess of love, but she was more of a goddess of like lust. It was a bad love. But all in all, it was pretty interesting. It definitely wasn't the worst film that I've ever seen, but I definitely wouldn't recommend everybody like run out and go watch it. But again, I am curious what your least favorite horror film is. Maybe I'll do a whole other video about my least favorite horror films or your least horror films. That's it for Stephen King's least favorite horror film. I'm very curious what his least favorite book is, so if you guys know that, let me know. And I will see you Tuesday and Thursday with another horror video. Bye guys.